Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Josh Lewis, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I have a lot of thoughts on movies, as many of you have probably already guessed, and I've always really wanted to get into doing more analysis-type content, putting the little bit of knowledge of film that I think I have to use, and delving into certain films a little deeper, getting into styles, techniques, ideas, and today I thought I would actually experiment with that idea and try my first hand at it. So today we're going to be taking a closer look at, honestly, what I think is one of the most underappreciated films of 2014, Gareth Edwards' Godzilla. And now, obviously, to get into Godzilla, I'm going to be talking very heavy spoilers, so if you haven't seen Godzilla, get on that, because it's pretty awesome, but this video is probably not for you. But if you have seen Godzilla, I would love it if you could stick around and discuss my interpretation of the film, because ultimately that's what I want these videos to be about, to share and hopefully shine light on different readings and, maybe come to certain conclusions, maybe convince a couple people of your own reading, whatever it is. That's what I want these videos to be about. So thanks for listening already if you are. I appreciate all of you that watch my videos on the regular, and especially those that are willing to hang around while I test out new kinds of content. I just really want to get into it. So let's talk about Godzilla, which is honestly now one of my favorite films of 2014. So Godzilla opens in very familiar fashion, scientists flying out to investigate a strange anomaly, which visually, this is an obvious callback to an all-time favorite film of mine, and obviously many others, Jurassic Park. Taking a look at that particular sequence in Jurassic Park, we have scientists heading to the unknown, with that now iconic Williams score, establishing this sense of wonder and exploration. And that sense is really important to the film, as Spielberg eventually argues in that film that though wonder and exploration aren't inherently bad things, they are potentially dangerous if we don't keep them in check. But at this point in the film, you don't know that yet. We're just excited to explore. But taking a look at Godzilla, on the other hand, however, that wonder is instead replaced with a sense of pending, overlooming dread. Something is out of touch, imbalanced, like we've already done something wrong, it's too late for that exploration phase. Next we move along to what is, at least early on, our central narrative, a deeply personal story of the Brody family, which is also the surname of the family from Jaws, if you want to know just how Spielberg inspired this film is. Quickly though, we establish Cranston as Joe Brody the father, his wife Sandra, played by the incredible Juliette Binoche, I hope I said that right, and their son Ford as he heads to school and they head to work at the local nuclear power plant in a made-up Japanese city. We really don't have a lot of time to get invested, so Edwards doesn't waste any time in getting us into the feel and rhythm of their lives, using a lot of close-up, intimate, again, personal cinematography. Plot mechanics move along just as quickly, however, as the plant they work at is hit repeatedly by this unknown seismic anomaly we investigated in that opening. Terrifyingly reminiscent of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster of 2011. Sorry if I butchered that pronunciation. I'm a Canadian. I suck at this kind of stuff. This anomaly sends their plant into a meltdown that eventually results in a heart-wrenching moment where Joe is forced to close the doors on his own wife to prevent a radiation leak. Again, establishing this deeply tragic human story as the center of the film. This is the kind of stuff most disaster movies do. Look at any given disaster movie and you'll see it focuses on a single group or family and their feelings and struggles, with the occasional expansion to things like the government, military, or scientists, just to give it this broader global feel. So it's really not all that original, but the personal connection here is still strong. It works because, let's face it, these are terrific actors being honed and focused by a terrific director who really emphasizes and controls these moments perfectly. Again, lots of close-up, intimate camera work, and some devastating performances. And the reason I'm really emphasizing all this is because seeing what the filmmaking tries to get across here is truly important to understanding some of the decisions and the eventual subversions that director Gareth Edwards makes later on that has really polarized audiences. We then cut 15 years later and get into the real meat of this story. Joe's son Ford, now at the forefront of the narrative, grew up to be a military bomb specialist, and he's now returning home to his own family. But before he can spend more than a few minutes with his wife and kid, he finds out his father has been arrested in Japan for trying to get back into the quarantine zone that used to be their home. So right away you have this theme of family and this father-son dynamic that's the real hook. You have a confused, hurt father that can't move on from the tragedy that, as he sees it, wrecked his family, and the kid that just can't throw his life away the same way his father has because he has his own family now. Lots of emotion, lots of intimacy. Cranston is still selling it like he was born for the role. Joe does wind up convincing Brody something fishy is up with the new seismic activity that has arisen again over in Japan, and together they break into the quarantine zone to retrieve some of his old data from the initial attack so he can prove whatever it is happening again. Here we get the first of many shots throughout the film comparing our characters to animals. With that, and the city looking more like a forest now, we start to establish this theme of nature and how despite human egocentrism, it's always ongoing, always lasting, and we see it here as it really starts to infuse itself into the setting. We'll get into the reason why a little bit later. They end up finding the data Joe was looking for, but before they can get out, they are captured by the same scientists we saw in that opening scene. It's important to note that everything we've seen so far in this film is from the Brody's subjective point of view. Everything we found, every place we visited, with the exception of the tone-setting initial sequence, has been strictly through their eyes. Because all that changes when we finally get our first look at it, the thing that caused all this damage, some sort of creature that's been feeding on the power plant's radiation for 15 years, but has now sucked it completely dry and is leaving it to find more. And it's here where the movie shifts and starts to become the movie Edwards truly wants it to be. A new story that exists outside the Brody family tragedy has been taking place in the background, and we start to reveal just what that story is. We start to cross-cut between this Spielbergianly staged, steady camera work that's incredibly powerful, then this raw, handheld work ripe with urgency and immediacy like that of Cloverfield. And similarly to Cloverfield, the shots of the creature are almost exclusively from the human perspective, creating this impeccable sense of scale and establishing simply through camera work how small and useless we are in this fight. This is top-notch disaster horror filmmaking akin to, again, Spielberg's magnificent work on the criminally underrated War of the Worlds. And before the sequence is up, something huge happens, something that really polarized audiences. They kill off Bryan Cranston, the guy who just acted his ass off for 40 minutes, and who was undoubtedly the true emotional center of the film. And there's a real disconnect inherent in his death. He's far off in the distance, and it's not used for full emotional impact, and this is where I think the majority of audience divide really begins, and I get it. We just spent 40 minutes getting invested in this guy, and then he just died in the most lackluster way possible. But while many read this as a mistake on the film's part, I read it as intentional. It's a key moment designed to serve the movie's true purpose, which now, again, truly starts to reveal itself. With a little help from our friend Exposition, we get a clearer idea of this larger story. These scientists we've been semi-following work for a company called Monarch that has been studying ancient creatures on Earth, including Godzilla, an ancient alpha predator feeding off radiation at the planet's core. Godzilla. But he's not who we just saw. What we saw was a glorified parasite known as a massive unidentified terrestrial organism, or MUTO, that hatched, and instead of feeding off the planet's radiation, opted for a far more juicy snack, our nuclear power plants. And this is why the tone of dread is prevalent in that opening scene. We already did something wrong. Our greed, our need for more power is what drew this creature to us. We distorted nature, and this was nature's way of answering back. And this is our real story. One similarly to our Muto, less interested in the traditional disaster movie snack of family drama, and more interested in ancient forces of nature. So Brody heads out with the scientists to Hawaii, where he can catch a flight home to his family, but again, Edwards is pushing this disconnect between them. And instead, we start to see the theme of family come up in less personal, more objective ways, like something as simple as a little boy being separated from his parents on the train, or a little girl wandering off on the beach. This is also when things like the military really start to show their presence, just like they do in other disaster movies, and what do you know? The first time we see them is in a forest compared to more animals. What Edwards is trying to get across with these comparisons, which also carry out into the next scene when a dog is the center of attention during Godzilla's first appearance, is really the true theme of the film, the statement he's been building toward that starts to make itself more clear. We humans, though our egocentrism leads us to believe otherwise, are insignificant in the overarching scheme of nature. As we discussed earlier, usually our human lives and our human struggles are the focus of disaster movies, and it's because we apply so much meaning to ourselves and our personal lives. We can't look at world destruction without thinking, poor me. And Godzilla and director Edwards are here to show us just how little we truly matter when nature decides to do its thing. It just has nothing to do with us on any kind of personal level. Those soldiers in the forest, that little girl on the beach, though we identify with them more on a personal level, when nature takes its toll, that personal level should be removed. Their lives and their actions really don't mean any more than that lizard or that dog. So keeping that in mind, it's clear that the second half of this film, which I'm not going to dissect every element of, since with this idea in mind, I think it's pretty simple to understand, and the storytelling choices Edwards makes slowly disconnect the family elements from an emotional story and starts merging them with this greater story of how our dumb emotions don't matter. It just becomes more and more clear as we see Ford's story literally become one and the same with the military story. He simply becomes a plot device in what was initially his story. The rest of the time spent with the humans isn't trying to get us to care about them or get invested in them, as many seem to wish it was about, I guess. It's actually trying to get you to not care. And it's just a fiendishly clever way to provide context, contrasting our tiny, measly point of view with the hugeness of the epic nature smackdown that's taking place. The humans scramble about like insects thinking that we matter, while the filmmaking argues to us with glaring clarity that we really fucking don't. Which is why I adore the military side of this story. It's really there just to get them to come across as a bunch of unorganized idiots. I mean, the only thing the humans manage to accomplish in this film is to make the situation even worse by giving the monsters a nuclear bomb to play with. Some will argue that Ford achieved something by destroying the Muto's nest, but at best that's really just delaying the inevitable. It's not a real solution. And funny enough, I think the mother Muto crying over her dead children is far more emotionally impactful than the Brodies being reunited at the end of the film. And that's not an indictment. I'd argue that that is actually by sheer design of the film. Eventually, though, after all is said and done, and we all got the chance to sit through some of the best directed action I've seen in years, seriously, this is a masterful showcase in action filmmaking with genuine build-up and payoff, and a lot of weight and impact to it. Something again akin to a Spielberg blockbuster that's rich with awe-inspiring, meaningful visuals, but also subversive and fresh in terms of themes and emotional resonance, or in this case, lack of emotional resonance. And even after all that is said and done, Godzilla has defeated the Mutos, restored nature's balance, and in doing so inadvertently saved us. And just to hammer his point home one last time, Edwards has the humans praise Godzilla as their savior. Godzilla was simply putting nature back in check, but of course we read it as him saving us, because even after what should have been a huge reality check to our truly insignificant place in the world, we can only comprehend what happened through our own subjective point of view. We're just a bunch of cocky pricks, essentially, and personally, I think it's incredible that a studio film with this much thought and craft put into achieving its themes and merging them with today's standard of blockbuster was actually made. No doubt this film has polarized audiences, as every time I talk about how much I like this film online, there are 50 people to point out how flat the human characters are and how they shouldn't have killed Cranston, and, you know, that's fine. I can accept that there are people out there that just aren't willing to engage with the film on its own terms, and instead bring their own expectations into it as the grading card. But this is a terrific, inventive studio film from a debut director, and I think that that deserves a bit more appreciation than what the film is actually receiving. So anyway, guys, those are my thoughts on Godzilla. If you're still listening to this, thank you very much for sitting through all my yammering and all my possibly bullshit, if you think that that's what it is. If you enjoyed this style of video, since it is the first of its kind on here on my channel, be sure to let me know, and obviously discuss and share your own interpretations of the film, or let me know if you agree with me, or if there's anything you think I got wrong. Yeah, I really want you guys to comment below and you know, get this discussion moving. Also, feel free to send some requests if there are any films you might want to see me dig into similarly in the future. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching this video. If you like this video, make sure to leave a like below. If you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. And as always, you can find my Facebook and Twitter in the description below. I'll see you guys next time.